Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister cooperate in any belated criminal investigation in his illegal vacations?
We will always cooperate. It's only the Conservatives that would have to ask that question, because we know that under 10 years of Stephen Harper, they had no regard when it came to offices of Parliament, and that's why today we find out that they don't even want to cost their electoral platform because they want to mislead Canadians just like Doug Ford did.
The Liberals are pointing a finger at the opposition, claiming the Conservatives are refusing to play along with the parliamentary budget officer. For the first time, the PBO is offering to cost every party's election campaign promises. Welcome back to Power and Politics. In the Power panel with Jen Gerson, Tim Murphy, Andrew Thompson, and Melissa Lantsman. So it's not mandatory for the parties to request the costing. The Conservatives say they will get their platform costed by an independent third party, but they won't commit to that third party being the PBO. Melissa, I'll start with you. So you worked on a platform that didn't really exist in the Ontario election.
Argue differently. There are certainly priorities on a piece of paper.
Right. That's one way of looking at it. What do you think? What do you think of the idea of submitting a platform to the PBO?
Look, the platform is sort of the holy grail of what it's. How an election war room is going to run, and frankly, how an election rollout's going to run, and all of the days of messaging. So, putting my political cap on as a campaigns person, I would never hand over a platform to a PBO. I don't know where it goes after that. I'm certainly not accusing the PBO of anything, but that would be a caution that I would take against certainly leaking my platform to the greater public before you're ready to announce it. On the question of platform and it being sort of independently costed, the Conservatives, federally have always put forward a fully costed platform, costed again by independent economists, by third-party economists.
Do you think that would change given the success Doug Ford had without doing that?
No, I think the Conservatives here have committed to that, and I frankly don't think that anything's going to change. Yeah, look, there's a lot of things that happen in Ontario that are not true in this federal campaign. One of them being is that Doug Ford became leader, just days before an election campaign started. So in terms of what it takes to put a platform together, the time wasn't there, and still there was priorities, there was promises, and they're certainly making good on them in Ontario, and very quickly. Tim will argue.
Tim, I was just going to say
Tim will argue differently.
Over to you, Tim.
Well, I think I'm not surprised that the Conservatives aren't prepared to trust an independent assessment by the parliamentary budget officer because they've already lost one battle with him around climate change and the cost of the carbon tax and the benefit that Canadians get. He clearly did, that office did an independent review, clearly came to the conclusion that supported the government's argument, which was an embarrassing result for the Conservative Party, and so obviously they're not wanting an independent person to come to a judgment of whatever they're going to be putting forward.
They say
maybe one day we'll even see a climate change plan from them, who knows. All that being said, I think, the notion of a lot of votes moving on the degree and scope of independent assessment of a platform is a bit rich. That being said, I think the idea is a good one from a kind of good governance basis. I know there's going to be mistrust of the parliamentary office by some campaign officials, but we've seen this used, I think, in Australia and one other place I can't remember offhand, but that, it's kind of worked there. There was confidence. They've put in place mechanisms to ensure that confidence is maintained. So I think, at the end of the day, though, each party will make a political judgment about whether that adds credibility to what they're up to or not, and people will criticize them for it, but I'd be a bit surprised if it moved with many votes.
Andrew, will the exercise kind of be a futile one if only one party submits their platform and the others don't? Or, if you can't compare, what's the value for Canadians?
Well, I suspect it's an issue that whichever party, probably the Green Party, will submit their platform, and the rest will rely on the economists who have helped formulate their own platforms to validate it. And at the end, Canadians will probably look at it and go, I don't know that I really care. The piece that I worry a little bit about, and I've always found curious with the Parliamentary Budget Office, is the PBO is modeled in large part on the Congressional Budget Office in the U.S. The value of that office in the United States is really to deal with individual issues that are being brought forward by independent, largely independent, individual Congress representatives. Here with the partisan system, it just doesn't work the same, and so you end up with the PBO really being used as a tool, particularly by opposition parties, although in this case, I guess, to Tim's point, by the government party to beat up on the opposition party, but it becomes overly partisan. And I'm not sure that it is seen to be quite the independent body that the American cousins are. So that's the piece that I would wonder about, is whether this is in fact something that PBO really should be stepping into, and what the real utility is in terms of the value of debate for Canadians.
Well, it's interesting you say that because yes, he can take requests, for example, from individual MPs, and he has in the past. The carbon study that Tim is referencing, though, he did that of his own volition. He just and he told me it was because of the amount of money that was, going to be the amount of revenue essentially that the government would be taking in from it. He thought it would be something worth crunching the numbers on. So
yeah, I'm not being overly critical of it. I just think it is one of the considerations as we see this kind of grafted now from the American model into a Canadian model as to how this is going to work here.
Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually completely agree with that. I'm not even sure that this is an appropriate role for the PBO. Parties are going to put out their platforms, and to be perfectly honest, I think parties spend way too much time and energy on long, detailed, specific platforms. I mean, one of the criticisms I'm going to lay at Jason Kenney's feet is that, he put out this incredibly detailed, incredibly specific platform. And what did we wind up talking about in the campaign? Like 4 or 5 things, right? I mean, there were like 4 or 5 top line items. I think parties hem themselves in way too much with detailed platforms that voters don't really care about and don't really read. I hear Melissa's statement that they become, guideposts for a war room in terms of messaging strategy and all that. I get that. But most voters, I mean, they're voting on a broad set of values, a broad set of promises, and a broad set of personalities. And that is what I think parties really need to focus more on presenting, because they're going to find that when they come into office, conditions are going to change, realities are going to change. Maybe their very specific tax plan, it doesn't actually work when they have the facts on the ground. So, I think
that give them an excuse, though, to sort of present some nebulous vision that people vote for?
Like they've ever needed an excuse, right? Like I'd much rather a party come to power saying, like, look, here's our broad set of values and our overarching set of goals, and we're going to do what we can with the situation that we have on the ground. I think that that's probably a much more honest approach than for a party to say, here's our 405-point platform fully costed down to the cent, and then 2 weeks later find out that actually a lot of those things just don't add up because of things they couldn't control.
Yeah, certainly.
That's my
yeah,
but there is a middle ground between those two, to be fair.
It's a lesson out of 2015, right? The NDP had this costed platform, and it ended up being more of a quagmire than a benefit to them.
Yeah.
I think some of the best campaigns have been run on sort of that 5 priority message. This is what we're going to do, and we'll figure out how much it costs when we get there, because we actually don't know how bad the situation is. And that's been very successful across the board, across parties.
Might lead to a little less accountability, though, but we'll see.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.